Morning of June 22nd, 1985. A suburb of Washington, D.C. A quiet neighborhood. Houses with manicured lawns. Kids walking to school. FBI Special Agent James Holloway sits in his car across from a modest two-story house. He has been waiting for 4 hours. On paper, the man inside is a low-level insurance agent, married with 2 kids, who has lived in this house for 11 years. According to the FBI, he is a Soviet illegal intelligence officer, infiltrated into the U.S. in 1974, operating under a stolen identity. At 8 a.m., the door opens. A woman steps out, Fisher's wife. She has a suitcase, gets in her car, drives away. At 8:15 a.m., the kids come out, wearing backpacks. They get on the school bus. Fisher doesn't come out. Holloway waits until noon, rings the doorbell. No one answers. He breaches the door. The house is empty. Beds are made. Food in the fridge. A cold cup of coffee sits on the table. Clothes are in the closet. Passport, wallet, watch. Everything is right where it should be, except Fisher. Surveillance cameras confirmed. Fisher never left the house after 9 p.m. on June 21st, at all. He didn't use the back door. He didn't climb out a window. He simply vanished from a locked house. The FBI interrogated all his neighbors, his co-workers, his wife's relatives. No one knew a thing. His wife divorced him in absentia 7 years later. The kids changed their last name. The burning question: how did a Soviet spy walk out of a house guarded 24/7 by the FBI and disappear without a trace? To this day, there is no answer. The illegal's real name was Konstantin Grigoriev, born in Leningrad in 1941. His father, Ivan Grigoriev, served in Smersh counterintelligence during World War II. After the war, he was transferred to the KGB's first chief directorate, Foreign Intelligence. His mother, Elena Grigorieva, was an English professor at Leningrad University. They spoke 2 languages at home. From childhood, Konstantin knew his primary weapon wasn't a gun or poison, but his tongue. Perfect, unaccented English. In 1959, at age 18, Grigoriev was selected for School Number 101, a highly classified KGB academy for training illegals. The school was hidden in the woods outside Moscow, behind barbed wire. Cadets were forbidden to leave the grounds. Their life histories were wiped clean. They were taught to drive, type, pick locks, and spot surveillance. But the most important lesson, they had to forget they were Russian. After 2 years of training, Grigoriev was assigned his legend. He would become William Fisher. The real William Fisher was born in 1941 in Trenton, New Jersey. In 1946, he died of polio. He was 5 years old. The KGB bought his birth certificate from a corrupt municipal clerk in Trenton. From that moment on, Grigoriev officially existed as an American. In 1963, Grigoriev was deployed to Canada. He was tasked with living there for 3 years, working on a farm and at an auto repair shop. The objective? Get used to life in North America, absorb the accent, the manners, the body language. He worked from dawn till dusk. No one knew he spoke Russian. At night, he wrote reports to Moscow about grocery prices, political bar talk, and the mood among blue-collar workers. His reports were labeled boring. It was a massive compliment. A boring guy makes the best spy. In 1966, he entered the U.S. using a Canadian passport, settled in New York, got a job as a salesman at an insurance company. Nobody ran a background check. America in the 1960s was trusting. If you spoke without an accent and had a driver's license, you were an American. In 1970, he met Margaret, an elementary school teacher. A year later, They got married. They had 2 kids together. Margaret had no idea who he really was. She thought he was just an insurance guy. She never caught him speaking Russian, never saw his cipher pads, never walked into his home office when he was busy. In 1974, he was activated by KGB officer Alexander Lipkin, who was working under diplomatic cover at the Soviet Embassy in Washington, D.C. Fisher received a 2-way radio, ciphers, and a list of dead drops in Rock Creek Park. He transmitted information twice a week. Mostly, it was economic data and political analysis, but occasionally he got his hands on top-secret intel. Over 11 years, he handed Moscow the deployment plans for American Pershing 2 missiles in Europe. He passed along the technical specs of KH-11 spy satellites, which were capable of reading Soviet documents from orbit. He handed over the names of 6 CIA assets recruited from within the KGB. 6 men were arrested as a result. 3 were executed by firing squad. 2 died in prison. 1 vanished. He never once raised suspicion. He had friends among the neighbors, hosted Friday night poker games, went to church on Sundays. He was invisible, and invisibility is an illegal's greatest asset. His downfall was a total fluke. In 1984, Fisher's courier, Viktor Shemov, was busted in Vienna passing in Krippy. Evening of June 21st, 1985. Fisher came home at 7 p.m. like always. He ate dinner with his wife and kids, watched the evening news. At 8 p.m., he went outside to water the lawn. A neighbor saw him holding the hose. Fisher waved at him. The neighbor didn't realize he was looking at him for the very last time. At 9 p.m., Fisher turned off the living room lights. His wife went upstairs. At 10:15 p.m., the bedroom light went out. The FBI logged this in their surveillance report. That report is still sitting in the archives. It includes the note, "Subject did not leave the residence prior to 2300 hours. Surveillance maintained." At 2 a.m., FBI agent Mark Williams, sitting in his vehicle across the street, noted in the logbook, "All windows dark. No suspicious activity observed." That was the final entry. At 6 a.m. on June 22nd, his wife walked out with a suitcase. She was heading to her mother's place in Florida. Planned to be gone for 2 weeks. She had no idea the FBI was watching the house. The agents let her pass. They only had a warrant for Fisher. At 8:30 a.m., Agent Holloway decided to make his move. Rang the doorbell. Silence. He radioed all the agents on the perimeter. Every single one confirmed nobody left. Holloway gave the order to kick the door in. The FBI claimed Fisher was tipped off by a mole inside the agency, and that he escaped through a pre-dug underground tunnel. This theory popped up on day 2 of the investigation, and it held water exactly until investigators actually looked under the house. Problem number 1, the house doesn't have a basement. The foundation is a solid concrete slab. Ground-penetrating radar scanned the earth 30 feet deep all around the property. No voids, no tunnels, just clay and rocks. Problem number 2. Fisher had been under surveillance for 8 months, 240 days straight. Agents swapped shifts every 8 hours, but surveillance was continuous. If he was digging a tunnel, they would have noticed. He would have had to dump the dirt somewhere. He would have had to carry tools in and out. None of that happened. There wasn't a single tool in the house. No shovels, no pickaxes, no bags of dirt, just a lawnmower and a bicycle in the garage. He couldn't have squeezed through the sewer. The pipes were way too narrow. Same goes for the ventilation. The windows were locked from the inside. The front door was also deadbolted. The FBI had to breach the door from the outside. Forensics checked the locks. No signs of tampering whatsoever. Fisher had no accomplices. His wife was completely in the dark. The kids, even more so. The neighbors, clueless. In 11 years in the U.S., he never once met with another KGB operative. Those are the rules for an illegal. You're on your own, always. By the end of 1985, the FBI was out of ideas. In a report that remains classified to this day, though excerpts leaked to the press, there was a line that became legendary. The subject presumably departed the residence by an unidentified method. The FBI, the premier law enforcement organization in the world, had no idea where a man they'd been tailing for 8 months went. In 1992, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the declassification of KGB archives began. Among the thousands of files was one specific folder. It was stamped Top Secret, Retain Permanently. Codename Salvation. The plan was drafted in 1983, 2 years before Fisher disappeared. It outlined the exfiltration of the illegal in the event of a compromised cover. The plan consisted of 3 phases. Phase 1. The operative preps a cache inside his house, a spot where he can hide out for 48 hours. They actually found a spot like that in Fisher's home. Between the first and second floors, there was an 80-centimeter, about 31-inch technical crawl space. You could get in there through a trapdoor in the ceiling of the walk-in closet. The hatch was camouflaged behind a panel. It was found during the search, but only on day 3. By then, Fisher was far away. Phase 2. Exfiltration through underground utility networks, but not the sewer. Through an old telephone utility vault running under the street, 50 meters, about 160 feet, from the house. The entrance to the vault had been bricked up in the 1960s, but as it turns out, the KGB had blueprints of all the underground utility grids in Washington, D.C. They knew that a brick wall could be dismantled in 2 hours if you pre-staged the tools. This theory sounds like an action movie, but it has physical evidence to back it up. In 1995, local fishermen dredged up a scuba diving suit in the Chesapeake Bay. It was Soviet, with a KGB patch. Right next to it were oxygen tanks. Forensics dated the gear to 1985. The FBI confiscated the haul. Nobody ever published a forensic report on it. Another piece of evidence, the ship's log of the K-239 nuclear submarine. It was declassified in 1992. In the entry for June 22, 1985, there is a 4-hour gap. The official explanation? Technical difficulties. But in 2000, a former crew member who had emigrated to Israel gave an interview. He said, "We surfaced in the Chesapeake Bay. We picked up a passenger. He spoke perfect English without an accent. He didn't speak a single word of Russian until we hit Gdansk. That's when he spoke. He had a Leningrad accent." The KGB never confirmed or denied this version. However, in 2010, 5 years after Fisher died, if you believe he died in Russia, a veteran of foreign intelligence said in an interview, "Some illegals return home, not all of them, in zinc coffins." The first witness is Fisher's neighbor, Harold Jennings, an elderly World War II vet. He lived across the street and often saw Fisher in the garden. The night of the disappearance, Harold was awake. He suffered from insomnia. At 2 a.m., he looked out his window and saw a light on in Fisher's basement. That was impossible, he later told investigators. They didn't have a basement. The basement windows were boarded up, but the light was on. I saw it. The FBI interrogated Jennings a week later. He repeated his statement, but this testimony doesn't appear in the disappearance report. Jennings' interrogation transcript is still unpublished. The second witness is Margaret Fisher, his wife. She died in 2015 in a nursing home in Florida. A year before her death, she gave an interview to a local newspaper. She said, "I don't know who he was. I don't know where he is now. But I know one thing. He loved me, and he loved the kids, and I pray for him every night." Her lawyer later slipped up. "She knows more than she's saying, but she's afraid." What was a woman afraid of, whose husband vanished 30 years ago? That he would return? Or that the FBI was still watching her? The third witness is KGB officer Alexander Lipkin, the very one who recruited Fisher. He defected to the U.S. in 1993. The CIA interrogated him. He provided testimony that is classified until 2030. But one phrase leaked to the press. He said, "If you think Fisher is dead, you're mistaken. He was too valuable." Lipkin died in 2015 in Virginia. His testimony has never been published. Fisher's kids changed their last name in 1995. They live in Ohio. They refuse to give interviews. Their lawyer said they don't know if their father is alive and they don't want to know. Why wouldn't the kids want to know the truth? Maybe because they already know the truth, and it's scarier than the unknown. In 1986, FBI Director William Webster held a press conference. He stated, "There is no evidence that the subject left the U.S. He could be anywhere." Journalists asked, "Where exactly?" Webster didn't answer, but he did sign an order to continue surveillance for another 2 years. Surveillance continued until 1988. FBI agents checked bank accounts, phone calls, relatives' trips. Nothing. Fisher had seemingly evaporated. In 1990, the case was closed. The formal reason? Lack of corpus delicti. No crime committed, but there was a crime. Espionage is a crime. It's just that the spy couldn't be caught, and the FBI didn't want to admit that publicly. In 2005, 20 years after the disappearance, the FBI received a call. A man with a Russian accent was calling. He said, "Fisher died in Moscow in 2002, buried at the Kovanskoye Cemetery, grave number 47. The FBI checked. There actually is a grave number 47 at the Kovanskoye Cemetery. The name on the monument is Konstantin Ivanovich Grigoriev. Years of life, 1941 to 2002. The FBI requested an exhumation. Russia refused. FBI experts compared Fisher's photo with Grigoriev's photo from the Soviet passport. There was a resemblance, but it wasn't complete. Plastic surgery? Or a different person? The FBI couldn't provide an answer. The case remained closed. The question the FBI doesn't ask publicly: if Fisher is Grigoriev, that means he really did get away. That means Operation Salvation was a success. That means Soviet intelligence played the FBI. And the FBI still doesn't want to admit it to this day. Today, 40 years later, the Fisher case remains one of the most mysterious in FBI history. The 240-page report is classified until 2035. Defector Lipkin's testimony until 2030. The scuba suit from the Chesapeake Bay is stored in an FBI lab, inaccessible for independent forensic analysis. Fisher's house was sold in 1990. The new owners renovated. The gap between the floors, where his waiting room was filled with concrete. The technical utility vault under the street is sealed forever. Fisher's wife died in 2015. His kids live in Ohio under a different last name. They don't give interviews. Neighbors who remembered Fisher have passed away. Only documents are left, and questions. The only thing left of Fisher is a photograph, taken by an FBI agent 3 days before he vanished. In it, Fisher is standing on the porch, smiling at the camera. He knows he's being watched, and he smiles. In 2010, the Washington Post published this photo. Under it was the caption, "The man who disappeared right under the FBI's nose. Where he is remains unknown to this day." The FBI is silent. The KGB is silent. The archives are sealed. The grave in Moscow hasn't been opened. There are more questions than answers. William Fisher disappeared on June 22, 1985. They never found him. He left no body. He left no blood, only an empty house and a question. Where is he? In Russia, under the name Konstantin Grigoriev? Did he die in 2002, like the grave at the Kovanskoye Cemetery claims? Or is he living out his days in Florida under a third legend that nobody knows about? His kids live in Ohio. They claim not to know if their father is alive, or they know, but stay silent. Their lawyer said they don't want to know the truth. Why? Maybe because they already know the truth, and it's scarier than the unknown. The FBI closed the case, but the officers who ran that surveillance detail still ask themselves, where was he that night when we were staring at his windows? How did he get out? And why didn't we spot him? How does a person evaporate from a locked house under round-the-clock surveillance? You can come up with your own theory. I'm not pushing mine on you. I just told you what I uncovered. It's up to you to decide who to believe. Thanks for watching until the end. If you want to see other stories where the official narrative completely falls apart upon closer look, hit that subscribe button.